I want you to listen closely because what I am about to tell you began with a single sentence that cut through me like cold winter air. This is the failure of our family. That is how my sister introduced me to her boyfriend on Christmas evening. She said it with a teasing smile, the kind she always used when she wanted to make herself look brighter by dimming someone else. My parents laughed, as if it were nothing more than a harmless joke. But he did not laugh. He simply watched them, quiet and still, as though he were seeing something none of us had ever noticed. My name is Olivia, and I have carried many silences in my life. But that night, something shifted. When that young man finally spoke, he gave a small smile and said words that froze the whole room. He said, "Interesting, because you're fired and we're done." I will not tell you yet why he said that, nor what happened in the moments that followed. But I can promise you this. Nothing in my life was the same afterward. Christmas lights were still glowing. The scent of roasted chestnuts was still in the air, yet the ground beneath our family began to tremble in a way none of us expected. If you have ever been treated unfairly by your own kind, if you have ever swallowed tears to keep peace, if you know what it feels like to be the quiet one in the room, then my story will speak to you. Stay with me, because what began as humiliation turned into something far greater, something that brought truth, justice, and a kind of joy I thought I had lost forever. Before we begin, make sure to subscribe to the channel and tell me in the comments whether you believe families truly know how much their words can wound or heal. The house was warm that Christmas evening, yet I felt a chill settle over my shoulders long before my sister opened her mouth. I had helped my mother set the table, as I always did. I had arranged the candles, carried the trays, and tried to keep my smile steady. My sister, Clara, arrived last, stepping through the door with that confident sway she'd mastered since childhood. Behind her walked Daniel, the boyfriend we had all heard so much about. Clara slipped off her coat and announced, "Everyone, this is Olivia, the failure of our family." Her voice was light, almost musical, but her eyes told another story. My parents chuckled, as though this little cruelty were an old family tradition. I swallowed, reminding myself to remain calm. I had learned long ago that responding only made things worse. Daniel stood by her side, watching each of them. He did not smile. He simply observed, his hands folded in front of him. For a moment, our eyes met, and something in his gaze made me feel seen, truly seen, in a way I had not felt in years. When he finally spoke, his tone was soft but firm. "Interesting," he said, giving Clara a faint smile. "Because you're fired and we're done." The room fell silent. Clara's jaw dropped, and my mother's hand flew to her chest. My father muttered, "What on earth?" But no one knew what to say next. I stood still, not out of shock, but because suddenly, for the first time in a long while, I sensed the balance of our family tilting, and not against me for once. Clara's face turned pale, then red, then pale again. She looked at Daniel as though he had spoken in a foreign tongue. "What do you mean, fired?" she stammered. "You can't fire me. Not today. Not here." Daniel kept his calm, his voice steady as warm bread rising in an oven. "Clara, I asked you many times to treat people with respect. At work and outside of it. What you just said to your own sister tells me everything I need to know." My mother stepped forward, trying to regain control. Now, this is a family celebration. Let us not exaggerate. Clara was only joking." Daniel turned to her with surprising gentleness. "A joke is meant to make people laugh, not bleed." I felt my throat tighten. For years I had carried such comments like stones in my pockets, walking through life a little heavier each time. Hearing someone else acknowledge the weight of them made my knees feel weak. Clara pointed at me, her voice sharp. "So, this is about her? She probably told you stories. She always exaggerates." I shook my head. "I didn't say a word," I replied softly. "I haven't spoken to Daniel before tonight." Daniel nodded. "I didn't need anyone to tell me anything. I only needed to watch for a few moments." My father cleared his throat, his discomfort growing. "Well, perhaps we should sit and eat before this gets out of hand." But nothing was in hand anymore. Something deep beneath the surface had begun to crack, and every person in that room felt it. For the first time in years, I felt a quiet strength rising in me, like a voice I had forgotten was mine. We all moved toward the dining table, but the warmth that usually filled Christmas dinner had slipped away like smoke through a chimney. My mother fussed with the napkins, pretending not to tremble. My father poured himself a generous glass of wine, though he rarely drank more than a sip on holidays. Clara sat stiffly, her eyes darting between Daniel and me, as if trying to decide whom she should blame first. I took my seat quietly, folding my hands in my lap. For so long, I had learned to make myself small, to avoid drawing attention. But now, attention was already fixed on the fractures spreading across the evening. Daniel sat down beside me instead of next to Clara. The gesture was simple, but it felt like a wall being built between the past and something new. He leaned slightly toward me and said in a low voice, "I'm sorry you had to endure that. No one deserves to be introduced that way." I nodded, my voice barely above a whisper. "I'm used to it." He shook his head. "You shouldn't be." Clara slammed her fork against her plate. "Are you quite done whispering? This is ridiculous." Olivia always finds a way to make herself the center of attention. My mother raised a hand, weary. "Enough, Clara. The food is getting cold." But the food was the last thing on anyone's mind. As we sat there, the truth settled over the table like heavy snow. This Christmas would not be remembered for its decorations or its dinner. It would be remembered as the night-old wounds finally stopped hiding in the shadows. After dinner, the room was quieter than I had ever known it. Clara sulked on the sofa, arms crossed, while my parents tried to resume small talk about gifts and the cold weather outside. Daniel, however, remained calm, sitting across from me, his eyes steady and kind. It was strange to feel a sense of safety from someone I had just met. "Olivia," he said softly, "you have patience most people lose too soon. I noticed it tonight." I looked down at my hands, unsure how to respond. Compliments felt foreign when I had been carrying shame for so long. "I've learned it," I murmured. "Sometimes silence is safer than arguing." Daniel nodded. "Yes, but silence can also hide the truth. And the truth must be seen, even if it shakes everything around it." Clara suddenly shouted from the sofa, "Oh, please, you're making this about her again." My father sighed, rubbing his temples. "Clara, it's enough. You've gone too far tonight." Daniel finally rose and looked directly at her. "Clara, it's not only about you. It's about respect. And if you can't show it, then you can't continue the way things were." I felt a flicker of hope. Could it be that this man, with no blood ties, was helping to repair what years of family tension had frayed? And for the first time that evening, I realized I wasn't just surviving Christmas. I might actually have a chance to reclaim it. The evening grew late, and the snow outside blanketed the garden in silence. I found myself standing by the window, watching the soft flakes settle on the trees, each one unique, delicate, yet part of something bigger. Daniel appeared beside me, carrying 2 cups of tea. "You look like you could use this," he said, handing me one. "Thank you," I replied, warming my hands around the cup. The aroma of cinnamon and cloves lifted some of the heaviness from my chest. He smiled gently. "You know, Olivia, families are complicated. They test our patience, our heart, and sometimes our courage. But they also show us what we're capable of when we refuse to be diminished." I looked at him, unsure if I should speak. It's been a long time since anyone spoke to me like that, I admitted. Like I actually matter. Daniel nodded. "And you do. Don't ever let anyone convince you otherwise." Inside, the house was quieter now. Clara had retired to her room, sulking in defeat. My parents sat together on the sofa, still processing the turn of events, and I realized something remarkable. For the first time, I felt a part of the room rather than separate from it. That night, I discovered a truth I had forgotten. Even amidst pain and humiliation, courage and kindness can bring warmth stronger than any Christmas fire. For the first time in years, I felt the possibility of a peaceful, joyful family Christmas, not just imagined, but real. The next morning, Sunlight poured through the curtains, soft and forgiving. I sat at the kitchen table, sipping my coffee, while the aroma of fresh bread filled the air. Clara had left early, her anger still simmering, and my parents were quietly cleaning up from the night before, avoiding eye contact with one another. Daniel appeared at the doorway, carrying a small tray with pastries. "Good morning," he said, smiling. "I thought we could start the day with something sweet. Christmas shouldn't end on bitter notes." I laughed softly, feeling a lightness I hadn't known in years. "You're very thoughtful, Daniel. It's nice to have someone like you here." He handed me a croissant. "It's easier to be kind when you see the truth." "And I see you, Olivia. I see your patience, your strength, and your heart." As we sat together, sharing the simple breakfast, my parents joined us. There was a quiet acknowledgement in their eyes, a sense of reflection, and perhaps regret. For the first time, I realized that my family could change, if only they were willing to see the harm their words had caused. And I understood, with gentle certainty, that this Christmas had not been ruined. It had been a turning point. What had started as humiliation was slowly transforming into connection, understanding, and a new kind of peace that might just last beyond the holiday season. In that moment, I felt a warmth deeper than any fire could give, a warmth that comes from being truly recognized and finally accepted. By the time evening arrived, the house felt lighter, as if the tension from the previous night had melted with the snow. Clara was quieter, no longer throwing sharp words like arrows, though I could tell she was still processing her own pride. My parents moved with more ease, speaking softly to one another, their smiles hesitant but genuine. Daniel stayed nearby, his calm presence a steady anchor. He didn't try to control the family or lecture anyone. He simply allowed space for truth to settle, for hearts to soften. I watched him and realized how rare it is to meet someone who sees you, not through your mistakes, but through your strength. "Olivia," he said, sitting beside me as we watched the last flickers of the Christmas lights, "I hope you know that tonight isn't just about what happened yesterday. It's about what can happen from now on. Families can heal, and people can change. You've shown courage, and it has made a difference." I smiled, feeling a quiet joy I hadn't felt in years. "I think I finally understand what that means," I whispered. That Christmas, the humiliation that had once threatened to define the evening became the spark for something new. My family, though imperfect, had glimpsed honesty, respect, and kindness. And I, Olivia, had found my voice, my dignity, and a peace I thought was lost forever. For the first time, I went to sleep knowing that even the most painful moments can turn into a blessing if we have the courage to stand tall, to speak softly, and to see the goodness waiting quietly in the hearts around us. The days following that unusual Christmas were quietly transformative for me. The house, which had felt like a stage for judgment and whispers, began to carry a gentler rhythm. Clara still held her pride like a shield, but I noticed small cracks in her armor, soft smiles, careful glances, moments of hesitation before a sharp word escaped. My parents, too, seemed to carry a new awareness, a kind of gentle humility that made the air easier to breathe. Daniel visited often, though never intrusively. His presence had become a quiet reassurance. He did not command attention, yet somehow he shifted the energy in the room. When he spoke to me, it was never condescending or dramatic. He had a way of making ordinary moments feel important. One afternoon, we were in the garden, the winter sun warm on our faces, and he said, "Olivia, courage is not just standing up once. It's standing up 1,000 times, in the small moments no one sees." I nodded, thinking of the countless Christmases, birthdays, and family dinners where I had stayed silent, swallowed my pride, and watched my own joy diminish. Perhaps courage could be quiet too, I realized. Perhaps it could live in patience and careful observation, in small gestures of dignity and kindness. Clara's behavior, while still prickly, slowly softened. She began to ask me for advice on minor matters, questions that seemed trivial, yet felt like olive branches. My parents, watching these exchanges, sometimes exchanged knowing glances, silent acknowledgments that the atmosphere in the house had shifted. The tension, which had been so normal that it felt permanent, was no longer immutable. One evening, Daniel and I sat by the fireplace, the room glowing from the soft flicker of flames. The winter air pressed against the windows, but inside, warmth stretched across the space like a promise. "Olivia," he said, "you've carried so much for so long, yet you never lost your kindness. That is rare." I felt a lump in my throat. "It hasn't always been easy," I admitted, my voice low. "Sometimes, it feels like the world notices everything except the quiet ones." He reached out, gently touching my hand. "The quiet ones often see more than anyone else. And when they speak, their words carry weight. Tonight, you've shown everyone around you a truth they had forgotten. Respect and compassion are never outdated." Weeks passed, and the house seemed to breathe differently. We laughed more freely, shared meals without tension, and discovered hidden layers of one another. Even Clara's teasing, once sharp and painful, became lighter, almost playful. I realized that the events of that Christmas had not been an isolated incident. They were the beginning of a shift that would shape the way we interacted for years to come. Daniel remained a steady presence, but more importantly, he had shown me a way to reclaim my place in the family without losing myself. It wasn't about proving anyone wrong or triumphing over old slights. It was about living fully, honestly, and gently asserting my worth through patience, courage, and quiet dignity. By the time the next Christmas arrived, I could sit at the table with my family without fear, without hiding parts of myself. I could laugh, share stories, and feel seen, not only by Daniel but by my parents and even in small ways by Clara. I understood something vital. Family is imperfect, yes, but it is also capable of growth. And those who walk with courage, compassion, and quiet strength can transform even the coldest, most fractured spaces into warmth, love, and hope. That year, I celebrated not just Christmas, but the rebirth of trust, respect, and the realization that one person's dignity can ripple outward, changing lives in ways no one could predict. I, Olivia, had found my voice, and with it, a family that could finally hear it.